And hello, Heart of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. And it's great to have someone who, and many of you will have seen his footage, maybe have seen his face outside migrant hotels, talking about the change that we are seeing in our societies, in our local areas. And that is Jack Hadfield. Jack, thanks so much for your time.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
Great to have you, and so much to discuss. And that
Mm.
at Jack Hatters is a handle that appears on many videos, and been interesting seeing the mainstream media also use it. But maybe you've been doing this for what, 6 months, maybe?
Yeah, well, actually, I've been doing really so then when since this kicked off, which was it's going to be 4 months in a few days from the end of July, mid July, when the protest kicked off in Epping. I think that was July the 16th, 17th, when that first started happening, and a few days later, I went down on the 20th of July. So I've been covering the protests all the way since then. So that'll be my 4 month anniversary of doing that. But I've been covering on the ground stuff previously, and I've been a journalist reporter for it's going to be 10 years today.
Wow. Give us a little bit of the background, your journalism background, and then what led you to actually highlighting what is happening with these hotels.
Yeah, so I started my career working at Breitbart all the way back in 2015. I worked on the tech vertical, so I covered a lot of stuff relating to big tech and free speech, online censorship. Obviously, we were one year out from Gamergate, so a lot of the earlier culture war content. We were covering a lot of the emerging online discourse. We were the young guys on the staff then, me having just turned 19, my colleague, 18 as well at the time. Um, so that's where I spent the first 2 years of my career while in university. Um, After that, after I finished uni, I took a little bit of time off, tried to make my own outlet. Didn't go so well, but I then decided, you know what, let's go back to the States again and cover some more American politics. So I've worked for, again, really most of my career, American outlets covering American issues. So National File, Valiant News, the Publica, some of my recent guys I've done with Political Insider. So a lot of that has been focused, especially during the Trump years, and of course during 2020, Stop the Steal, all the vote rigging that was going on over there. So from the 2020 election, about January the 6th, I basically did not see the sun. I was writing multiple articles a day, trying to think, okay, maybe I can get the expose that proves a voter fraud, and this will get Trump back in office. But alas, it did not happen. But I decided that I was going to put all my energy into making sure I did my utmost, because then I could at least say, hey, I fought. I didn't step back down. So then, of course, we had a few years of Biden, and then I started writing with the Publica and again American outlet, but I started focusing more on British issues and content as well over there. So that's what led me to covering the Southport riots for them last year, which I was right in the middle of and got my tooth knocked out by, and chipped off technically by some of the patriots there that day. Sadly, as they just saw me as another sort of regime mainstream journalists. I tried to tell them otherwise, but emotions were running high that day. So yes, I started working for them, and then I've been in a spell of looking for other outlets working at, and it just happened to be so that I was on retainer for someone at the time, and Epping just kicked off, and I thought, you know what, I'm not doing anything. Why on earth should I not just get out, get the footage? I know I'm good at it. I know I enjoy it. And then it all just spiraled from there.
So tell us, what are some of the kind of takeaway points you've actually seen? Maybe surprise. I mean, I've seen kind of footage of buses in the middle of the night and things like that, and all different footage. But what have you learned, or what has surprised you, or what stuck
Mm,
with you as you've done this kind of week in, week out?
mm. Well, I suppose hearing about it previously and seeing it a little bit previously, but really seeing this in action was the two-tier policing in terms of just exactly how the police behave at the protests when it's not entirely some if you see a police officer punch some guy in the face repeatedly, hold him down the ground and smack their fist into him, which I have seen happen at the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf twice, which is crazy, and I have footage of that from the buildings above when the guys, local residents there, said that to me. That's very obvious police brutality. But the two-tier policing has been on in terms of dealing with the protests, always a lot more subtle. And to me, this has been in comparison to how I've seen them police the stand up to racism, Antifa demonstrations that go on sometimes at the same time, and of course, in other locations as well across the country. So, for example, with the Patriot protests, the counter hotel protests, you would see oftentimes a lot of usage of Section 14 orders. For those of you who don't know, that means the police put a restriction around a certain area and say, "Oh, from this point, you're not allowed to protest in that area, and if you do, you'll get arrested." So, for example, they would put it outside the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf on one side of the street and force everyone to move over to the other side there as well. And the Section 14 orders will apply to the entire area of the protest. And then they say, okay, basically, you've all got to go. This is now a no protest zone. There's other restrictions, Section 11, Section 12, Section 37 relating to, again, the movement of people. Now, when it comes in place with anti standard racism, I never really usually see these orders get imposed. I saw them imposed at a Palestine march a couple of weeks ago, but most of the time, the Section 14 orders have not applied to the other side. That's just one thing that I've noticed. Another thing is the how the police kettle and interact with the protesters, and in fact just arrest people generally. So when there'll of course have been instances of clashes between protesters and the police, but I would say most of the time this has been the police kicking them off. For example, again, just randomly arresting somebody from the crowd. Of course, that's going to make the crowd go insane. At Epping, in the end of August, start of September, I think at the end of August, I believe it was, they tried to march down into the middle of town. The police line stopped them. They turned around. Okay, we'll move back to the Bell Hotel. The police line stopped them again, and they kettled them in, and they let them walk previously before. Why on earth can't they do it now? And then you get them kettled, and of course, everyone's like, well, why won't you let us move? There's nobody else here. Literally, what is your problem? Then the police get close, and then obviously things happen as well after that. The mask orders. I saw Antifa go around masked up all the time. 24/7. Yeah, the Palestine marches, they were masked up all the time. But the one time the guy, the flag Spartans from the Isle of Dogs came to the Britannia Hotel, masked off. This is a take your mask off order immediately. They held them, pushed them up against the wall, stripped them down, strip search, and take your mask off. And if you put it back on, you'll be arrested. So it's all of these really subtle ways in which the police behave in terms of specifically dealing with the protests themselves. Of course, this isn't even to mention arresting people like Sarah White and Callum Barker for being protest leaders, for literally no other reason than that. Thankfully, Sarah White has just had her charges dropped literally just yesterday. Callum still has his pending as well. But so it's the far subtler ways in which the police will control and direct the people on really our side of the argument, well, whereas they let radical leftists generally run free.
Where does that? Do you think it's coming from? Obviously, we have a left-wing government for our US viewers. Keir Starmer, who President Trump didn't really know who he was for a while the other day. But uh, so you've got that, the government, but then you seem to have politicized policing where one side is treated differently than the other, and that two tier, of course, from Southport with Elon Musk using that hashtag two tier care. But where do you think it comes? Is it an inbuilt bias in levels of the police force? Is it the political side? Is it the media who drive it? I mean, there are a lot of factors in play. How do you perceive kind of that pressure is coming against those of us who are maybe on the right and have immigration concerns?
Yes, it's definitely institutional within the police. If you look at the how the College of Policing trains police officers to begin with, really a lot of this happens to be because of Tony Blair. Again, this I've joked constantly that I'll look at an issue in this country and I'll go, "Oh, what caused this?" Oh, it was Blair's fault. Almost every single time, it leads back to Tony Blair doing something, and of course, one of those things was forcing police officers to have a university degree. So first, already, you're forcing them to go into a woke institution, mainstream institution to begin with, and then the College of Policing. If you look at the things that they've talked about, the way that they instruct the police to behave, all far more on the woke end of the spectrum. And then this is not just a policing thing, but it applies to the institutions that exist in this country generally, sort of the deep state, but not necessarily, but the quangos, the civil service, the police, the military. You cannot get up beyond a certain promotional level without subscribing to woke ideology generally. Once you get to want to become, a police captain or whatever, I'm not sure whatever roles they have, chief superintendent, a lot of politics gets involved in this. And the people at the top of these organizations are completely woke. So they're not going to let somebody who's not that within their ranks. So you can have non woke rank and file, that's for sure. And some of the police officers I've dealt with have been perfectly lovely. But there are other rank and file officers who would certainly enjoy just beating the hell out of you. And they would love to do that. Um, and these people are, the good people in the police are not those ones that are in charge and directing them. And the good people in the police will still happily obey the orders that they're given.
I've also seen, we've witnessed it. It's good for the US viewers to hear this when the police being dressed differently, and therefore you know what's happening. So when you have them with shields, when you have them with helmets, with visors, this isn't soft hats. They are going in, and as you mentioned in the kettling, they seem to be going in to antagonize, to incite a response. And then you look at how they respond often to the other side, especially in the Palestinian demonstrations. It's a very much more low key, gentle. You don't have the 30 police vans, all with semi armed troops. Um, I mean, speaking to that, to let our US audience be really aware of how this provocation happens simply by how they dress, and it looks like they want to fight.
Yeah, they will get the riot police, the big guys with the batons and the shields out as soon as they can for any protest that's vaguely on our side or vaguely likely to kick off. You have the TSG, the Territorial Support Group, of course, which is sort of one level below the full-blown riot police. But these guys are the main ones that will be out in force most of the time at these protests, and they will batter you if they have the chance. I've seen again pepper spray. I got a little bit of parva, which is the artificial pepper spray in my eye at the end of August when the march went through the Canary Wharf shopping centre itself. But again, with the two tier at this Palestine protest that I said that I went to a couple of weeks ago, you had the TSG guys there, and they had batons, and they were sort of holding them back. The Palestine guys being like, "Go back, go back." And they didn't actually strike and went through. But I, of course, have seen that happen at the sort of right wing protests far more often than previously. And this is not a new phenomenon. I saw the same thing happen at the protest in 2020 when you had Black Lives Matter out on the streets of London and the counter demonstration Save Our Statues when Black Lives Matter were going to graffiti all over Churchill in Parliament Square and so on and so forth. So Black Lives Matter, the police were there, one fist in the air, kneeling down. We respect you. We stand by you, etc. And of course, they just go crazy, mental, loco, and start beating anyone up that they have the chance to do so. Whereas in the Save Our Statues protests next week, when they're in Whitehall, I saw the proper riot police, as you described, with the helmets and the shields and the truncheons, all the full get up, moving down Parliament Square towards Whitehall. And I remember very specifically, I posted a clip of this on Twitter, some of my early on the ground reporting of chants from the crowd going, "Where the F were you last week?" Because the riot police were not there when Black Lives Matter were tearing up the streets of London. But as soon as somebody says, "Hey, actually, we're going to come out and make sure that Parliament Square doesn't get vandalized," that's when you need the riot police to come and stop you, apparently.
You must be a real pain in the ass to the government because they've kind of been able to keep a lid on this and keep it away from the public. You've got some articles have been written over the years, but nothing portrays a story like a short film showing actually what is there. We've seen as I mentioned, the people getting moved in the middle of the night with
Mhm.
coaches and other things. I mean, for and then, of course, you're when you see your footage, the BBC using it, you
Yeah.
think, what kind does that feel like? That must be a surreal moment.
Yeah, it is. As I said, I've been in this for 10 years, and sometimes my stuff has gone quite viral. I had Trump Jr. quote tweet me once, which is very cool. My phone literally went from nothing to ding ding, and we went, and I was like, okay, somebody big has just reposted me here. Um, but yeah, I've never had anywhere near the level of attention on my stuff. Yeah, and people also, watching me just for me as well, rather than the stories I report. I've got a lot of love from people on the ground who constantly say, "Oh yeah, thanks so much for what you're doing. We really appreciate you getting the story out there." But of course, it's not just me. As much my ego has been massively inflated by this over the past few months, and all the great support from everybody out there. But there are a whole generation of independent journalists, streamers. I will just name a few, of course, my colleagues: Emma Dunwell, Martin Gauci, AY Audit, Wesley Winter, Mystic Media. You have Young Bob as well. All there, out there getting the coverage that the mainstream will not get at all. They will refuse to be there. Um, I've barely seen the BBC at any of these protests. I've seen them maybe once or twice here or there. The more right wing you go, the more likely you are to see these outlets more regularly. So I think GB News and the Express. The two I've seen more mainstream outlets regularly, actually on the ground with people on the ground ready to cover what's going on here. But yeah, I do think it does make a difference because we post it. Certainly me, I know I post my stuff pretty unfiltered, just straight up. The highlights of what's happened here, straight directly to X. My others do YouTube. I know I need to tend to that as well. But this is the footage that is from the ground, raw, unfiltered. No editorial bias put over it. It's just me and my camera. Um, so I think people really do appreciate the variety of angles that you can get, the variety of people you talk to, and again, especially with multiple people, multiple independent people covering these. If let's say you don't like me for some particular reason, you're not a big fan of the fact that I usually wear blue suits. You're more of a red person. But if you don't like me, you can follow and look at the content of so many other people who are going to be there at the time. And because we're also in different areas of things, if I'm over there and you're over here, and something's happening in one of those locations or both of those locations, we're both going to get it. We might miss one, but we're all going to get something. So we're able to cover so much more and get a wider totality of what happened with the sheer amount of content that we can get out here. So people can really make up their minds for themselves, almost as if they were live, direct, on the ground themselves.
Yeah, and these hotels obviously full of migrants, the government spending billions. It's because we have open borders. And it was yesterday, the front page of the Daily Telegraph was a government admitting Sabana Mahmood, who's the Home Secretary. I think that what was the title? The title was UK has lost control of its borders.
Mm,
It was Mahmood, as in UK government, say UK have lost control of its borders. Um, some of that pressure, of course, is from reform from Nigel,
mm.
but I think some of that pressure is what you and others have been doing, highlighting, showing it to the public, and the government cannot hide. I mean, how do you what do you think of that response from Labour?
Mm.
Somehow, I think they're just trolling us, they're mocking us because you're the government. Maybe it's because they're 4 years away from election and they can say what they like, and they're probably all going to lose their positions anyway. What are your thoughts on this new realization from the actual UK government that we don't have borders anymore?
Yeah, well, I think it's because they simply can't pretend that there isn't the problem. So yeah, imagine, we're in a situation where you have the open borders, we have so many people pouring in, not even just across the channel, but through legal migration as well. If you're the government, you can't just stick your fingers in the air and go, la 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 la. No, everything's fine. We live in a utopia. Don't worry about it, citizens, because nobody's gonna even believe that for a heartbeat. But what they might do, what they might believe, is say you're the government, and you go, well, this is all because of the Boris wave, which is true. The Tory government for the last 14 years has opened our borders. They've led this mass migration experiment. Oh, it's so terrible. Which is all true. But then you go, oh, it's really complicated. And look, we're really trying our best to kind of fix it over here. But like, we recognize that there's a problem, guys. We know that there's a problem. So don't worry. We're working on it, but it's so tough. It's really hard to fix. But we're gonna get it under control. But we know there's the issue, and we know, like you, we also are concerned. Um, and that's more of a line that's at least more believable than simply ignoring it altogether. And I think that's one reason why, obviously, you've got Mahmood as Home Sec, but in the recent reshuffle where she became Home Secretary, they appointed Mike Tapp, who's the MP for Dover, as the Immigration Minister. And what since he's been elected, he's been very much on the yes, I too, like you, hate mass immigration. I am a patriot. I love the Union Jack and the Queen and Paddington Bear. And Nigel Farage, you like Putin and Russia, so you're a fake patriot. Nigel Farage, you're lying to people who are taking the billionaires' money. You're a fake patriot. So with bringing somebody like Tapp and those angles of like Labour is the real anti-immigration patriotic party line, bringing someone like him into the government is proof that they're going to try to swing more towards capturing lost reform voters than capturing, say, lost your party voters, the Greens, etc. That Labour are being pulled away on both sides here, and I think again, with these appointments, with these takes, it's seemingly pretty obvious which section of their previous voters that they're trying to get back with this.
No, you mentioned the Union Jack, and I see your far right extremism. I've got a Union Jack with a Spitfire, so maybe I'm even worse than
Mm,
you. I don't know. But earlier on this month, Labour tabled a motion in the Tower Hamlets Council. And maybe you can just let us know a little bit about the flag issue, remind the viewers.
mm,
But they wanted to label the Pink Ladies protest and Raise the Colours campaigns as far right. So you demonize your opponents, which is a trait of the left we have seen all through these culture wars. Um, Tell us about that. How councils are responding, I think, to
mm.
women's groups coming out in fear of their safety because of the amount of rapes that we've seen with migrants in these hotels, but also the Union Jack being made a far right symbol. You've kind of highlighted both of those. Speak into that.
Yeah, so as you said, the Tower Hamlets Council, based right in Whitechapel, which is, oh my god, it's such an awful area of London to be in. You know, you walk out the tube station is in English and Bengali, and there's just open meets everywhere. I saw it was in Whitechapel a few months ago, and I saw a guy just carrying a trolley of like meats behind him. One fell on the floor. He just picked it up, put it back in, and carried on. It was like, oh, this is gross. This is not England. This is not the England that my family grew up in. I, oh, just all of the way that Whitechapel is in certain areas of London, multiculturalism, diversity. Wow, the food, yeah, great. Actually, no. So I was forced to go there to cover the counter protest with the Pink Ladies outside the Tower Hamlets town hall. As I said, where you said they were labeling people that wanted to put up flags. Now they didn't specifically call out the Pink Ladies in this. I did think they did mention the Flag Spartans though, but we knew again overall who they were all referring to. People. Oh, you're saying that sexual assault by migrants is bad. Yes, that's because you're far right. No. So they're putting these things, labeling all of these people, putting up flags in their communities. As you said, the flagging, obviously done by the Raise the Colours, Flag Force up in York. These organisations that just want to really make this country feel British and English again, and actually beautify it in a way. I think it just looks so much more attractive, unironically, to have our streets lined with our national symbol. Um, but of course, this is spreading division and hate, according to many councils across the country, and certainly Tower Hamlets Council. And you think to yourself, well, if you hate the Union Jack, do you consider yourself British? Well, what do you feel? If you hate the flag of this country, why are you still here? So I think that's what you got to ask these people a lot of the questions. Of course, this doesn't apply to this mass migration as well, but there are certainly so many white English liberal councillors who hate these colours and think, would you be better off, going to Venezuela or North Korea or somewhere that's a little bit more socialist, communist for you? Maybe if you fly the red flag, that will be more to your liking. But a lot of the councillors have really been triggered by this, especially the older Gen X, a boomer, sort of Lib Dem green Karen, who's like, oh, these most far right extremists, how dare they? How dare they? Raise their national flag. This means fascism and racism is about to take over the country. And they have a complete fit about it, and then try to use what little power they can, which is simply just this council says that you are far right. And it's like, okay, great, cool. That means nothing. We're going to keep putting the flags up, and the flags are still going up. So it really is. I think a lot of the response to this has been sort of the first death throes of woke in a way, where these people realize, oh no, we can't be we don't have the complete majority on all the councils anymore. We don't have the backing of the big civil servants and the MPs and the quangos, or we certainly won't do come 2029. And they're panicking because their grip on the culture, both as it is and politically, the actual power of it as well, is waning. And like a wounded beast, they are thrashing out in fear and panic.
No, you're right. It is a wake up for the British people, but a huge onslaught to shut down that. And we saw that onslaught after Southport, I think, in one of the biggest ways. But you mentioned two tier, or I mentioned a number of two tier
Mm,
areas. It's also two tier judicial system, and there was one post you put up comparing what happened to Lucy Connolly. She
mhm,
was held on remand for some hurty words, and the courts were told they could run all night just to
mhm.
get these people who said hurty words, imprison them, And then you've got the attack, the awful attack on the synagogue. So
Mm,
you've got a literal Islamic terrorist that had been bailed, I think,
mm.
after being accused of some rape or sex crime. And you kind of think, where are our legal system where they are more concerned that you might say something that they don't like, as opposed to
Mm.
sexual abuse of women? And I don't think anyone outside the UK can grasp the awfulness of our judicial system.
No, you're right. This is the one of the big problems with how this country is run is that the judicial system is completely captured. Whereas if you look at the United States, for example, the way that judges are appointed in some ways, and a lot of the time, they're elected. Some of them will, and a lot of them will be elected on not a specifically partisan line, but it'll be obvious. Somebody will be like, I am tough on crime. I support law enforcement versus I think we should defund the police. I'm for rehabilitation. So even though they might not have a D and an R on their chest. You know which way that they would vote, and you know exactly how they would be in office. And so because of this, you will have incredibly left wing judges in the United States in areas like New York and California, in the cities, the real shitholes. They will be there and they will run it probably worse than some of the judges you have here. An example of this in DC, there's a judge who Big Balls, who's the guy that works for Doge when he was just beaten up by two African American youths just a couple of weeks ago. The judge has said, no, I'm not going to jail you. I'm giving you probation. Despite him being, bloodied and bruised and battered. So again, one example, literally that I just heard happen a couple of days ago in the States. But you have those judges there. But again, on the other side of that, you do have the judges who will be exactly the right person that you would want to have backing you. Look at what happened at Kyle Rittenhouse's case. That judge was not taking any nonsense from the prosecution. If that was in Britain, there's no way you would have seen any way of the pushback of the judge actually standing up for the legal system, for law and order, and for the rights of somebody to defend themselves from being attacked by a literal paedophile. You'll have judges that will work happily with ICE and back, immigration laws in the States. And that's because, at the very least, people can admit that everybody has biases and that nobody is unbiased. So you get some of the hard left judges, but you get some, good, decent, judges who probably vote for Trump as well. Whereas in here, we say, the judicial system is unbiased. And what that means is they're all going to be left wing. Another reason why we have this is the Bar Association. The American Bar Association will let you in, if you pass the bar and you need to do some really serious misconduct. If you're if in order to be kicked out of that, but in order to become a KC here, it's a far more political system. These people will pick and choose who gets to be KCs over here in this country. The Bar Association is far much more restrictive, political, and they can say if you're in and out, which means you can have, again, right-wing lawyers in the States. You basically don't get that here as much as you can. So there's a much greater stranglehold and pretense of unbias in this system. And that leads to judges, Robert Jenrick's been pointing this out, saying, becoming members of pro-immigration charities, sitting on their boards. And it's like, well, how on earth could we trust you to rightfully punish, say, an illegal immigrant who, say, raped a schoolgirl on the street, versus, again, somebody who is going to be protesting against that? We've had this, Harish Kabatu, the guy who sexually assaulted a 14-year-old schoolgirl in Epping, got just under a year in jail, and three people who, I will say, riot is probably the better word. First couple of nights at Epping, I'm not condoning what they did, but there was certainly violent protests or fiery protests, a riot in response to this. These men have got more time than that man did. This is, frankly, I think, they should be in jail as well for what they did. I'm not condoning this, But you look at the difference between the two of what's going on here. The only reason why they got that time and not say 6 months, they got 2 years or whatever it was, rather than say 6 months, and he got just under a year rather than 5 or 10, is because of the way the judicial system operates and because they're biased against people who want to stand up against mass migration and demographic replacement in this country. And if you dare speak out, we'll lock you up and throw away the key.
Um, I I want to finish off asking you about Sabana Mahmood, the
Mm,
Home Secretary. Uh, w- we've mentioned about the two different types of demonstration. We've had the Palestinian, the pro Hamas, more or
mm,
less. We've had those happening non-stop, and that's produced a culture which I think some Jewish people feel concerned, feel afraid for their safety. Um, and then you've got the Home Secretary actually taking part, joining some of
mm,
those, and you. I, I, mean, growing up, don't remember hearing government ministers. This is possibly before she was a government minister, expressing such feelings, expressing such views. You were expected to just collect a responsibility. You're there, but now it really does concern me having the Home Secretary, the person in charge of all the policing, um, anti-Israeli,
mm,
anti-Jewish, pro-Palestine, very strongly Muslim, and all that that brings with you in terms of freedoms.
mm,
I mean, let us know more about that. That certainly will concern the US audience where we are going.
mm. Yeah, I think there has been, in terms of the specific pro-Palestinian demonstrations, I don't think that Jewish people would be scared if pro-Palestine demonstrations, sort of had your very classic, crusty left greeny guys like "Free Palestine." Oh, it's so terrible. Yeah, I'm against genocide. That kind of thing. It's just them, going down. They're the hippy dippy types who've been doing this for decades. You know, I think you could disagree with them, but I wouldn't ban their protests. I would let them continue on. And of course, there are some people like that at the Palestine protests. But what I've seen, there have been a lot of the firstly violent Antifa types that I see around some of these protests. Anyway, all masked up, fighting with the police, getting back in them, and more concerningly, you'll see the first and second generation immigrants on the streets of this country, not just saying "Free Palestine" or "I'm against genocide." They're chanting "Death, death to the IDF." I'm hearing Arabic chants going on around me. And if I, and signs suggestions that they support Hamas and Palestine Action, a now prescribed terrorist organization, which is an organization that had that because they broke into a British military base and they completely vandalized our equipment. That frankly is, if not terrorism, is getting very close to radical political action. These people are, I'd say, if not the majority of 50% or very close to it, or a very good and loud chunk of these protests here, which is why I think that Jewish people in this country are feeling more concerned for their safety and their existence here. I said, I don't think you have to support Israel to realize that, I don't want a bunch of radical Islamist extremists on my streets who who would happily kick my teeth in as much so they would kick in the teeth of an IDF soldier. These people are not my friends. I do not want them anywhere near me. Most of them, frankly, I think a lot of them probably shouldn't be in this country to begin with. And I think that when people talk about cracking down on the free speech of Palestine protesters, again, if they were your hippy tippy normal, just peaceful protest types, nobody would be afraid of them. Nobody would be worried about the things that they're saying. But they aren't. And that's why we have to look at this with a different light. And that's why it is concerning that somebody like Shabana Mahmood will be supporting these types of people. And I think that's realized again. I think that since October the 7th, and since these protests have started, a lot of Jewish people in this country have realized just if they haven't necessarily been political before, the problems of mass migration, demographic replacement thrown right in their face. There are now these people are a growing proportion of the population, and they probably are severely anti-Semitic. These are the people who supported you march the day after the terrorist attack at the synagogue in Manchester. So we've really got to be worrying. I care about the free speech of British people in Britain. If you're not from here, why on earth would I want you marching down my streets, chanting support for prescribed organizations? I think free speech rights for British people and people who exist here. But again, I think the Trump administration is the right thing. They just started deporting people who are in America on temporary visas for insulting the memory of Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated just a month or so ago. So, frankly, if there are people supporting Hamas on the streets of this country and they're here on visas, I think they should be revoked. And that sounds. I think that's a sensible. I think that's a sensible course of action. I don't know about you, and I assume probably people in the audience will agree.
Well, yeah, you think, of course, the government always should be there to protect the people, and it seems as though many governments we have had recently have not been concerned of the health and well-being of the British public. Just to finish off on one final thing, we've seen the after the attack in the synagogue, and it's a line, what, never let a crisis go to waste, or never let a tragedy go to waste. And there's a lot of concern that the government will use what happened there to further restrict demonstrations. We've got generally a very proud tradition of people allowed
Mm,
to protest, to demonstrate.
mm,
But that's kind of linked with, I think, the government in the last few months have put down concerns of immigration as one of the areas that signify if someone is a far right extremist.
mm,
So, what you're doing, highlighting, talking about, that makes you an extremist simply because you're concerned of mass immigration. Maybe are you concerned that the government will take that tragic situation in the synagogue, and maybe from that we may see other restrictions on the rights to protest?
mm. Yes, I think is entirely possible. Again, I'm not someone who wants to see peaceful protests banned because I disagree with them. I would not ban, say, stand up to racism for peacefully protesting, although they're very argumentative. They get up in your face. I generally stand up to racism very specifically are not violent people. They're the hard left, but they will peacefully picket and demonstrate and argue and get in your face and dox you and all of these other things. But they aren't violent people. If there are peaceful Palestinian protests, I would want those to continue. They aren't violent people. I think we should allow anybody, if you're non-violent, to have whatever opinion you want and share it on the streets of this country. But you're right, and the government will use this idea, because we've got to crack down on these protests because they supported it. But it'll be the same thing like Prevent was used for. Again, this is a system for those who don't know. Obviously, in the counter extremism section of the police, in terms of investigating people before they became violent and radical terrorists. It was initially set up to de-radicalize young Muslim men from becoming radical Islamist extremists. But of course, Prevent then moved over to focusing on young white men who go, "Oh, I love Nigel Farage, and I think mass immigration is bad." And then you have the police knocking at your door
Or
at
I
age
love bacon.
14 because you said that in a lesson at school. Yes, yeah, exactly. Or I love bacon, which is very true. So I do think that that there should be the police should be able to crack down on violent protests and violent groups. For example, as Trump is doing in the United States, designating Antifa a domestic and foreign terrorist organization. I think Antifa should be banned. And I genuinely think, these people, because through their actions, they want to topple this society, civilization. They are far left extremists, and they would guillotine us all if they had the chance. They are not peaceful people. They are regularly violent. If you get too close to them, they will smack you in the face. These people are violent terrorists. If you look at how they behaved, Antifa has been linked to multiple murders and attacks as well. This is not a peaceful organization. Those groups, the massed violent groups on the streets of this country, could be legitimately cracked down upon while still respecting the free speech rights, again, of people across the political spectrum to peacefully protest. And I think that's a line that we should walk. I don't think I don't think it's radical to say that that Antifa should be cracked down upon, of violent people should be cracked down upon. That's not a restriction on free speech, but we do have to make sure that the rights of everybody to protest, regardless of their opinion, must be protected. But in terms of being of a violent group, that's I think that is legitimate for policing of this country to do, because otherwise, if you say, oh well, we can't, it's their free speech to have a riot. I mean, where does that lead to? Seriously, that is civil unrest. Riot police exist for a reason. But yeah, you have to strike a really fine balance, and the line is very, very thin on where you do this here. So you should generally try not to restrict as much as possible. But when there are, legitimate ways to do so, I think the police should do so. But I don't trust the Starmer regime, or frankly, most governments, to be able to walk that line correctly. And you're right, that really is the concern. Not that the line exists, but will the government stay on the right side of the line or not?
No, absolutely. Jack, it's great to have you on, and I'd encourage all the viewers and listeners to make sure and look at the videos you're putting up on at Jack Hatters and promote them, push them out, because this is obviously what is pissing the government off and forcing a rethink, seemingly rethink. So please do play your part in highlighting all the great work Jack does. But thanks for your time, Jack.
Thank you for having me on.